Alrighty. I was reading earlier. Trouble with putting on the harness
Yeah.
has begun. I guess even kind of growling at you guys as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like where he will kind of try and dodge it, and then if we try and go for it more, he'll get upset. He doesn't really. This is my mom. He stays with my mom while I'm at work.
Okay.
You don't really have that experience with him, but
No, he doesn't do that to me.
Okay.
um, but I don't know if he probably like I don't know. Like yesterday, I tried to put him in his crate, and he was upset by that. So then after that, it's like once that trust is like broken, then it's kind of like no recovering from that. For me being able to then like put him in his crate actually, or like put his harness on.
So yeah. So once you've triggered him, it's
Yeah,
he's stuck.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And then so do you just let it? Do you just leave him alone and let him write it out, or?
Yeah, but it's becoming kind of difficult because then I missed an appointment yesterday because I couldn't put him in his crate or like different things like that.
What happens if he's not graded?
I've never done it before.
Okay.
We've only had him for like 3.5 months.
Okay.
So
How old is he?
when we got him at the end of October, they thought he was about 8 months.
Okay, so
8
just
to
over a
9
year
months.
approximately.
Yeah.
And this has been happening since you got him?
No, it really only recently started happening.
Okay.
When we first got him, I mean, he was a rescue, so he was pretty like low key. And then I think as he's gotten more comfortable, some of these behaviors have started to come out.
Okay. What have you done so far to try to remedy it?
Book a consultation here.
Okay.
Yeah.
You haven't tried like any positive reinforcement stuff, counter conditioning stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we've done some training. Like he can like sit and stay, or he like waits for his food when we put it in his bowl, and that's just been from like treat training. But haven't really been able to do the like leash reactivity or this new trouble that he's giving us.
Okay. Anything else?
Pulling on the
Yeah,
leash.
he's quite a puller on the leash.
Okay.
I mean, he wants to sniff. He's very much a sniffer, and then he'll just get really. He'll pull a lot on the leash. He'll react to different dogs sometimes. So it doesn't make for a very relaxing time walking him
Sure.
at all.
Gotcha. And I'm sorry, you said you're not seeing the growling behavior with putting in the
No, he comes to me pretty much every day during the week. We rendezvous or she drops him off before work. And then what I will see is he might not want me to put the harness on, and he'll kind of play chase around the island or something, and I just sort of have ignored it, and I get my dog ready, and then just I've got the pile of harnesses and leashes there, and my dog comes and gets ready, and then he'll eventually come over, and he might like back off a little bit, nothing aggressive, and I just say we're doing this, and I think there's a difference where I think they get a little almost afraid because he's done this to them, and he's never done that to me, so I don't feel fear at all, and I just do what it takes, and he lets me do it, and he's okay with it.
Sure. So would you say he's ever tried like even like a lip curl or something with you?
No.
No? Okay. Who's the caretakers for this guy other than your mom? You
Me, and then I live with my boyfriend.
Okay,
So
so
we
you and your
live
boyfriend.
in an apartment down here, but then we take him to her house while we're at work.
The first time he exhibited this behavior, what happened? Did you just back away or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And then it sort of snowballs,
Yeah.
Because like we'll have to take him out, and we have to kind of figure something out. So I try and like regain his trust. And like sometimes we start by trying to put the collar on first, and then like as soon as you get it on, he's like totally fine.
Yeah.
So I'll sometimes start with the collar because it's easier, and then I'll put the harness on.
With the collar, when you say easier, does he try to give you issue, but it's not a problem, or is it really just a harness that he has an issue with?
No, like he would probably be upset about the collar, but it's not as much of a hassle to put it on. So like I can more easily like grab him and just clip the collar
Whereas with the
close.
harness, there's more kind
There's
of
more
involved.
going on, yeah,
Okay.
to get his legs in it and everything like that.
Does he have any other kind of touch sensitivity?
I mean, sometimes if you try and like snuggle up too close to him, if he's not in the mood, then he might like let out a little bit of a like low growl, but it's nothing like baring his teeth. It's more so just like, hey, I don't want that kind of like energy that I
Yeah.
get from it, which is fair. The other thing that
But is that fair? He should
To a
do
degree,
it, right?
yeah.
I mean,
I'll cover that, but
Okay.
to a degree, yes.
I don't know what he's doing. But the other thing that we have worked on a lot is like his fear of like my dad or like my boyfriend coming through the door, which he'll still like bark at them, but it's not nearly as incessant. Or my dad's done a lot of work with like throwing treats at him and things like that.
Okay.
but it's like every time he barks at my husband coming in the door, even though, and then he gives him treats and he's jumping all over him to get the treat,
Uh-huh.
but it's like this frenemy situation,
Sure.
you know.
Okay. Anything else?
He'll randomly bark at noises when we're just in our apartment.
Okay.
Um,
Like hallway noises, people walking by, stuff like
Yeah.
that? Okay. Anything else? Can you bathe them, or have you not bathed them?
She bathed him most recently, and
That was his first bath, and I, at first I thought, he was like flailing and, you know, but no aggression. And
Mhm.
then once I just kind of got the nice warm water on him, he just stood there and he liked it.
He has no trouble with us like touching his paws or anything like that.
It's really
typically.
just the harness and the collar.
And
Yeah.
then we're not sure, is he equating that with somehow
Going in his
having to
crate.
be put in his crate and then they leave? And that's like, the crate is just like not so fun because then everybody's gone.
Does he throw a fit in the crate?
No, like once he's in there, I've only heard him bark like a few times when I'm like leaving, but typically once he goes in there, he's quiet then.
Gotcha.
Right, and when I put him in, he might play chase with me a little bit to go in, but I'll put him on put the leash on him or whatever, or carry him up there, and then
Uh-huh.
he just is okay with it, you know?
Okay. What about with like people? Like here, I can see he's approaching me. Like he seems curious. But like if I go to touch him, or am I gonna see something there? Or
He'll probably
Just back off.
back away.
Okay.
He wouldn't be aggressive,
Okay.
I highly doubt. But another thing when you were saying anything else, like if you go reach in to pet his head, I think he kind of does the bob and weave a little.
Yeah.
Sometimes he doesn't always like the top of his head pet.
Sure.
But he likes the neck and,
And he'll like lay back for a belly rub as
Yeah.
soon as you gain his trust. So, and he did that a lot more like, I don't know, probably a month ago, but now he just seems a little bit more nervous.
okay. Anything else?
I don't know, I might think of more things as we talk, but that's all I can really think of right now.
Do you have a guess to what your dog's the root of the issue is?
I don't know. I mean, he was a stray in Texas, so I don't know what could have happened to him before.
Prior. Okay.
But it kind of seems more like an anxious reaction than like,
What makes you think anxious?
just because how he's like dodgy sometimes, or like any time that he does get kind of upset with us, it seems like more of a fear reaction in terms of like going in his crate, having to go in his crate, or having to be maybe like constricted some way in the harness or something like that.
Okay. So from what I can see right now, you have a nervous dog, and I would categorize him as a bully. Okay, so you have a nervous bully. This is anxiety, which makes sense because you're in a completely unknown environment. Anxiety wants to move, okay, and I wouldn't pet him here. Anxiety wants to move, which is why you see the pacing. Humans do the same thing too, right? So if you look at humans and how they express emotion, anxiety, we also tend to pace, bite our nails, things like that. Like it's a kind of a jittery behavior. Nervousness will calm down, but then it startles. So like when you hear the noises outside and he startles, or when you said if you go to pet him from over the top in the bob and weave, that's typically nervous dog. Okay, nervous dogs will relax, for example, and then like you said, if your husband or you said your boyfriend,
Mm-hmm.
walk in and then he'll bark. That's typically a nervous response.
Mm-hmm.
Or like let's say everybody's hanging out and your husband like jumps up and claps, a nervous dog would start barking, right? Because they got used to the calm environment and then there was a sudden change in energy and it causes them to bark. A fearful dog wants to keep away from the threat. Okay, so like if he was scared of me, he would be backed up in the corner growling at me, and they tend to not let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if I move backwards, they'll move towards me. If I move in, they'll move away from me because they're scared. So anxious energy moves a lot. Nervous energy will calm down, but then trigger if there's a sudden change. Fearful energy tends to want to keep away and won't let it go. They tend to be the dogs that continue barking nonstop because they're scared. Okay, they go into panic. And everybody, humans, dogs, animals, whatever, to a degree, feels these emotions in life. Some people trigger more easily. Like anxiety is a very common thing now, right? I've had times in my life where I've become anxious, but it takes a lot for me to become anxious, right? But there's people that I know that it takes a little bit for them to get very anxious. Does that make sense? So dogs are the same way. A lot of it's genetics. Even when we get dogs, for example, that we know for a fact come from an abusive environment. So, for example, there was a Doberman that I trained many years ago. She had stab wounds and bullet holes. It was clear that they took her from an abusive environment, right? This gentleman adopted her. She was territorial to home. She wasn't letting people come in. He did training with me. And then halfway through the program, she started coming out of her shell. She's very sweet. And is completely fine now. And so she came with some baggage, but a lot of it started to go away because she was in a stable home. She no longer had to worry about abusive humans. So that starts to take a weight off the dog. What was left over was just some trust issue, which I helped him push through with training. And now she's like a regular dog. Okay. Not all dogs come to what we would call normalcy for the most part. Every case is different. It just depends on genetics and it depends on how bad the behavior is that we're working on. Okay. So here, when it comes to bullies, they're usually insecure dogs. Okay, just like with humans. Confident kids don't pick on the kids to make them feel good because they're already naturally confident. It's the kids that have something to prove. That's an insecurity. They tend to bully the weaker. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Dogs are the same thing here. So that's why this is interesting because you're having issues and you're going, well, yeah, he's giving me some trouble, but I ignore him. I tend to my other dogs. By the time I come back, he's a little wary, but I do what I need to do, and then we just go.
Yeah.
So he's learned, okay, I can't do that with you, but I can do that with you. Does that make sense? And it empowers them. It gives them control over something, and it creates this kind of false sense of confidence. Does that make sense? And then that's where these issues tend to happen. And when you said it snowballs, you're 100% correct. Because the ego grows. The dog goes, I bullied you here, so can I bully you here? Can I bully you here?
I own you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now that's what the relationship is. Does that make sense? So don't worry about it in the sense of like, oh, I screwed up my dog or whatever. I get clients that do all the wrong things, but the dog they have just has no issues, so it doesn't matter. But then I get clients that, to the human, do all the right things, but because of the dog's personality type, they still have issues. Okay? There's no, unless you're a professional dog trainer of 12, 14 years, like no perfect way of going about things. At some point, something's going to happen. It's just whether or not are you equipped to deal with it in the moment. But the first interaction is always the most important, like with humans, first impressions, right? So the moment the dog tries to bully, if you back away, he goes, aha, that is now the relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like, for example, we had a board and train. She just wrapped up like a week ago. No one could take her because they couldn't pull her out the kennel because she would growl at them and snap at them and stuff. We have special equipment here. I knew the dog was scared. It was a fearful dog because she would hide in the back of the kennel and growl at you. So I just took a broomstick and I went and I touched her from across the kennel and she panicked because she's scared. And I just waited there because she doesn't know the broomstick isn't me. Okay, the broomstick is an extension of my body. So when she bites the broomstick, she thinks she's biting me. So I let that happen. And eventually she's like, this isn't working and you're not running away. And then I grabbed the leash and I looped her and I took her out, right? So now we were able to take her out. because
So when you did that, loop the leash around her neck, was it like she's flailing around and?
she expressed it all when I touched her.
Okay.
Because since I'm the potential threat, as soon as I made contact with her, the brain goes into, this is the worst thing that could happen to me. I waited patiently, took her about 30 seconds to a minute before she finally settled. She got it all out of her system. And then by the time I looped her, she was like, already, well, I already gave you my best shot, which is trying to bite you. You didn't back away. Now, when I went to pull her out the kennel, she did put the brakes on because the kennel provides some form of security. And the moment we pulled her out, she was completely fine. Okay? Because the kennel empowers the dog because there's only one way in. One way in and one way out. So the dog knows it has cover. So they're more likely to be defensive there. So knowing this, but knowing that she was a fearful dog, because everything the owner told me, all the bites that she had were nips. There were no full-blown like bites. So I was like, all right, you're a chicken. You're acting big and tough. People who don't know what they're doing are going to be scared of you. I know you're bluffing.
Yeah.
Right. And by the time she left, she was already coming out of her shell. When she would see us, she would start wagging her tail. She'd start coming towards the front of the kennel because she had gotten over the fear because we didn't allow her to hide in it. We made her come out anyways. Plus, we did training with her, and all of that started to build her confidence and stuff. Okay. Your guy's case is a bit different, just because with the nervous dog and the bully behavior, it's going inwards. So inwards, I mean, it's going towards the family. Okay. Most dogs' issues are outwards. Anybody outside the family. So that tends to be easier because then I know the owner can safely handle the dog. It's just if a guest comes over, if somebody the dog doesn't know doesn't come over, if Amazon's delivering a package, that's all outward things, right? So we're not worried about the dog causing any harm to the human there in that sense because it's not towards the owner.
So you're saying which is easier?
When it's outwards. His is going to be a little bit more complicated.
Oh.
Okay, because it's inwards, because it's targeted her and her boyfriend. Okay, so to give you an example, I had a case that was like half his size. Okay, it was a doodle. Same exact thing. They couldn't put a harness on the dog, they couldn't collar the dog, all this stuff, because he would bite them. Okay, so she shows up to the training session. She's like, sorry I'm late, Jesse. It was a pain to get him equipped to come here. She's like, I can't put the collar on him. Can you help me? I said, sure. So I go and I grab the dog by the collar. Right, he starts freaking out. He's panicking, and I'm just holding, and it looks terrible, but I'm doing nothing but literally holding the collar. He finally just stops, does this. I get the collar, I put it on him, turn it on, let's get started. Right? She came back the following week, and she's like, I'm sorry, Jesse, I couldn't do anything because I just couldn't get over the trauma of what it looked like with the behavior. And I'm like, well, it looks bad, but trust me, it's just your dog using what it's done in the past because he doesn't want to do what you want him to do. But because she wasn't able to get over that, I couldn't help her. She literally couldn't put the collar on the dog. So I'm like, well, then why are we here?
Yeah.
Okay? Because it was targeting towards her and her husband. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I can, one of the first things I always tell everybody is I can only take you as far as you're willing to go. Okay? Sometimes it's easy peasy. Sometimes I think it's going to be easy and it's very difficult. Sometimes I think it's going to be very difficult and it's very easy peasy. Once we're in the training, I have a better idea. But the issue, and it's not to say that I can't help you, but just the hardest part that we're going to have here is because I'm assuming you did research on how we train, the methods that we use before booking this. So we use prong and e-collar, okay? The reason why we use these tools is dogs are physical creatures, they bite each other. They bite each other as a form of play, as a form of correction, as a form of affection, where they even like nibble and chew on each other, right? They're very mouth-based creatures. If I didn't have this, I would show you, but I have a scar here of 10 stitches from a dog biting me because it didn't want to go in the kennel back in October of 2019. Okay, it's not an aggressive dog. He had just never been made to go in the kennel. So when I went to load him in, he freaked out and he panicked, and the only way he knew to stop me was to bite me. And it was a Great Dane, so there was no way I could avoid the bite. He literally just looked up and chomped down. Okay, 10 stitches. I still train the dog. He still comes to daycare. He still comes to boarding. We have no issue with him since. So he wasn't aggressive. He just panicked in the moment. Okay. So dogs are physical creatures. So positive reinforcement only or food-based training is great for things you want to see again. It's great to some degree for counter conditioning. Okay. And I would probably do a little bit of that here. But if ultimately he goes, I don't want you near my neck with that collar or that harness, no amount of food can get him to change that mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When we use aversives like prong or remote collar, the issue that we're going to have here is because it's an aversive, plus it's something that's going to go around his neck, we're more likely to see an escalation. Does that make sense? Because the dog goes, I know that thing you're going to put on my neck gives you either one, more control, or the ability to give me consequence. So I'm going to try to prevent you from putting that on me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's where the complexity comes in. Now, I've worked cases like this in the past. We can definitely work through it, but I can only work through it if the owner does the homework and if the owner goes, okay, you're being a brat, this is nonsense, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you did,
Yeah.
right? But you did it from the get-go, that he goes, okay, not even going to try it.
Yeah.
Here we're going against a couple of months or whatever the time frame is of him having these wins. So it's going to empower him a bit more to want to fight back because he knows he's gotten his way before.
Yeah.
Okay? And I always paint things like worst case scenario for people because if they hear worst case scenario and they go, I'm still willing to do this, Jesse, I go, then I can help you. Right? But if I paint it easy, oh, sure, yeah, we'll get this done, don't worry about it. And then it gets hard, you're like, hey, you took my money.
Yeah.
And here we are, right? And I'm like, oh, sorry. Like,
Yeah.
and now I got a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Right? So the way I would see this potentially working out with this, right, is I always do encourage counter conditioning, okay, which is where we can use the dog's kibble. I'm not against treats, but think of treats as candy. It's not necessary to the dog, right? So then at some point he goes, you know what, I like that cheese that you got, but I dislike the harness more. So the cheese isn't worth the harness. Does that make sense? So then I go, okay, well now we're not doing cheese, we're not doing treats, we're going to use your kibble. And the dog goes, the kibble tastes like crap, not worth the harness, right? I go, okay, well then you don't eat today. And I put the food away. And I repeat that process, okay? Hunger at some point is going to kick in. It's against instinct for an animal to starve itself to death by choice, okay? At some point the dog's going to go, I'm very hungry, I need to eat. Survival instinct kicks in. So now the dog goes, okay, I'll take the kibble now with that harness. So now the dog starts to like the harness because the only way it's going to eat its what it needs, what is necessary to it, is to take the harness. Does that make sense? But then, the hard part is the human. The human goes, oh, it's been 3 days, my dog hasn't eaten. Oh, it's been 4 days, my dog hasn't eaten. Oh, it's been 5 days, my dog hasn't eaten. And I go, as long as the dog is not looking lethargic or looking sickly or anything like that, it's normal. It happens. That's just how much the dog dislikes the thing that we're trying to do.
But the question then is, if you're going 3 days, how do you get them to go outside?
You'd probably use like a slip leash. And also we wouldn't do harnesses. I don't recommend harnesses. So with the pulling problem that you're having, harnesses promote pulling.
Yeah.
Okay, and they also help promote reactivity as well, which is another issue you're having, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you see this here, how he's moving towards me, and you can see the taut leash here, is he's feeling pressure against his chest. Okay, that creates agitation. That agitation over time can become aggression and or what we call leash reactivity, okay? So I understand why people use harnesses, especially for smaller dogs, because they don't want to put pressure on the trachea, especially when you got like the little teacup dogs like the Yorkies and stuff like that.
She has.
Yeah, I understand that. The issue is though, is that if you put this on the wrong personality type, now we start to get these other issues, okay? So harnesses are meant for pulling. Huskies were harnesses to pull sleds. Horses were harnesses to pull carriages. Right? There's even like things where dogs were harnesses and they pull those big heavy tires, but the dogs are working. Okay. Here, when we're trying to walk a dog and have a nice pleasant walk, well, if they're pulling us, it makes it unpleasant for us, but then causes agitation to them, which then causes leash reactivity, which then makes it more unpleasant for us. Okay. So this is where, of course, training comes into play. Now, once a dog is trained, technically speaking, it doesn't matter what you walk them on, but I always tell my clients, like, well, then you could technically get up to off-leash level control with the methods that we use, up to no leash if wanted. But at that point, I go, just put the dog on a standard collar and leash instead of having the harness, because the harness over time can undo the training. Okay? Because if the dog feels even any little bit of tension, it's called opposition reflex, where they want to go against pressure. So if you pull back, they pull forward. You pull left, they pull right. You pull right, they pull left. It's instinctual to them, okay?
Won't the same thing happen around their neck with the collar?
Yes, but with harnesses, a dog's power is in the chest. They can push forward with the hind legs and then pull forward with the front legs. And then our center of gravity is here, it's our hips. So if you're like this and your dog is pulling, we get this kind of leaning motion, right? I've had clients been pulled down by their dogs. You know, there's a video on you go on YouTube where there's literally a lady walking Great Dane on a harness in a flexi. Something catches the dog's attention, and you literally just see the woman hit the ground because the dog just lunges,
Yeah.
right? Because there's so much power behind that chest. That's why horses, they don't want them having pressure against the throat here when they're pulling that carriage. They want it on the chest. It takes away pressure from the throat, which is uncomfortable, but then also that's where the source of their pulling power is. Does that make sense? So, I still always encourage counter conditioning for touch sensitivity type stuff.
So what's
Okay.
counter conditioning?
That's using the food to get the dog to allow us to put the collar on, to put the harness on, or whatever we may need to do. Easiest thing would probably be using a slip leash, right, in the beginning, because then you just loop the dog and then you go. There might be some apprehension there. If it becomes too much of a problem, then I would show you how to go about leashing the dog. Okay, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
The other things that we do, for example, if we really need to handle the dog and we know the dog's going to be defensive or aggressive, is we use welding gloves, right? Because it allows us to get in the dog's personal space. They can bite all they want. You don't feel a thing. Okay, and then dog goes, all right, well, I tried to bite you 30 times. You didn't give up. I'm still here. You're still here. And you still put the collar on me. All right, well, that didn't work, right? So there's also that as an option. It just looks ugly.
Yeah.
You know, but we're not doing it. It's all psychological for the dog. You ever watch Cesar Milan, the dog
Yes.
whisperer?
Yes.
Yep. There's episodes where you see him like grab the dog, and you see the dog panic, and he's like, "This is all psychological," and he waits it out, and eventually the dog just lets it go and they calm down.
And psychological meaning you're not harming them psychologically,
No,
right? By doing
it's
these.
them. They're creating they're creating the issue, right? So like, the human example would be: have you ever received a text and I was like, "We got to talk," right? And you're like, you start to think, what are we going to talk about? Why can't we just talk about it now? Why can't you
Yeah.
just text it to me? You see that? That's you're making something bigger than it is. And they could come to you, and it's the simplest thing. And you're like, well, you could have just said that.
Yeah.
Or it's like, we're breaking up.
Yeah.
Or, you know, this is happening, right? It could be bad. It could be either way. But you don't know until you're given that information. Same thing for the dog. If I grab them by the collar, they're making the big deal. I'm just holding the collar. I'm not throwing them around. I'm not yelling at them. I'm just literally grabbing the collar. That's exactly what I did with that one dog. I just grabbed his collar, and he freaked out and he panicked, and I just rolled it out. And then once I rolled it out, I put the collar on, we trained like nothing happened.
What
It's
if
just
he bit you though during that
he
whole?
did,
Oh.
but he was literally half his size. Like it was little scrapes,
Okay.
you know. So I was like, okay. I was like, even if this guy bites me, like I'm not worried about punctures. Plus, with the way that I hold the collar, I had it kind of twisted so that he was just getting here as opposed to the meaty part of my hand. You know, so there's things that I know that allow me to put, like for example with Cambria, when I touched her with the stick, I figured you're probably going to try to bite, but we had another dog. I did the same thing. It broke the stick in half. Okay, so for that dog, I said, I'm going to go put my bite suit on, which is a 60-pound suit that I wear. So if the dog attacks me, I'm completely protected. You see that? Two completely different dogs.
Yeah.
But touching them with the stick still allows me to push. And if the dog's going to outlet anything, it's going to be on the stick. I'm still technically safe.
Yeah.
So if the dog broke the stick in half, which the one dog did, she actually just left earlier today. This was months ago when she did it. I was like, all right, I'm not going to step in that kennel with you. Let me go grab my bite suit. With Cambria, she tried, but it was very unmotivated. She was just doing it out of necessity. And then I stepped in and I looped her up and I said, all right, let's go. She was
Right.
completely fine.
I would say, I think with you guys, it becomes this fear situation because you don't want to mess them up psychologically and like ruin your relationship with them, I think is how this has snowballed for them. Does that
And-
make sense to you?
Yes, and because it's counterintuitive. So we do counter conditioning. There is no guarantee that counter conditioning will work. Okay? Then it's we just do it. And then it's we do it, and if you act out, I will give you consequence. Does that make sense? So like, if he tried this behavior with another dog, okay, let's say the dog went over and tried to lay down next to him, and he goes, I don't want you in my space, and bites the dog, right? He's not being aggressive. He's correcting the dog, saying, I don't want you in my personal space. He's establishing a boundary. That receiving dog has a choice. That dog goes, sorry, I'll respect your space, and I won't do that again. Or the dog goes, I'm going to lay down here, and if anybody's going to move, it's going to be you. And they bite him back. and now they have a conversation. That conversation is essentially what we call a dominant scuffle. They're fighting each other. There's going to be a winner, and there's going to be a loser. That's dog. Okay? Online, because the most common thing is positive reinforcement. That's the most common thing that you'll see almost anywhere that you go, right? It's great for puppies under 6 months. We use it all the time. We use clicker training, gentle leader type stuff under 6 months because they're puppies. It's real basic. Try to prevent problems, basic obedience, nothing that's ever going to be substantial is what I always tell my clients, okay? At 6 months, we bump them to big boy, big girl training, which is remote prong collar, and we train them to an adult level, and we get off-leash reliability, okay? But the remote collar and the prong collar allows us to bite the dog, if that makes sense. So the prong collar, that spiky looking one, is meant to mimic a dog bite. That's why it looks the way it looks, okay? So many, many years ago, before I started using aversives, I was completely against aversives. I was positive only, okay? Because I was like, that looks barbaric. But then, as I started training dogs and I started to realize the limitation that food had, I was open-minded. I started to expand my palette. So then I went to gentle leader, then I went to slip leash, then I went to prong collar, and then I graduated to e-collar. I went through all the phases. So now, because I have all that insight, I go, this to me is the best tool and has the highest ceiling and the highest rate of success, pending the owner does the homework. Everything else not only has a much lower ceiling, but then if I have an owner that's also not doing the homework, we're also not going to get that far, right? So I've literally built my career over the past 12 years training almost every dog with remote collar because it's the most consistent as long as the owner follows the instructions.
Yeah.
Okay? That's always the greatest variable in training is the human.
Yes.
So here, with these tools, let's say, so go ahead and shorten your leash here. Go and hold it. And just like that. Yep. You need something? Okay. Can you bring me my sleeve, please? It's on the bench. So here, pull up on your leash. Pull up. Now relax a little bit. Wait a moment. Good. Pull up again. Wait a moment. Going to relax. Good. She's going to come back up, so he's probably going to trigger again. Okay. Going to relax your arm. Good. Wait a moment. Pull up again. Good. Wait a moment. Going to relax your leash. Up again. Yep, you're doing good. Now start to relax.
Around with this front?
Yeah, and now relax. Up on your leash. Up. Good. Wait a moment. And relax. Right there. Go ahead and have a seat. Good. Yeah. So here, nervous dog.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I do too. Like I've started on walks if he gets reactive to, or if a dog's passing, and I can tell he'll sometimes get low, like if he sees a dog.
Yeah. Start to stalk.
So then I'll just like go to the side and wait, versus like doing anything else.
Yes. So here, to explain how this works, so up on your leash again. Yeah, up.
Up.
Yep, and then wait a moment. And now relax. Okay, up again. Yep, doing good. And now relax. Okay, relax a little bit more. Yep, can you relax? There you go. Good. And that's he's shaking off the stress there. Okay. So here, he was resting. He heard the doom, doom. That was my wife coming up the stairs. Right, he starts barking.
Yeah.
So here, when you pull up, and on this particular tool, it's not the greatest, but it still can get what we're looking for, is up is an unnatural direction for dogs. Because dogs are on the ground. Forward, left, right, backwards, right? So when you go up, the dog goes, what's going on here? Right? So you could literally see when she pulled him up, he was kind of like looking like this because he's like, this is unnatural to me, right? So when you're holding up, you're preventing pulling back. Most people pull back or up and back, which again is increasing that tension on the chest. So now that empowers the dog even more. When you go upwards, you're not creating that opposition reflex of pulling backwards. You're going in an unnatural direction. The dog goes, what's going on here? So now he's how'd you say? He's got two problems. He's got the dog he doesn't like, and then he's got the fact that he's like this, right? So then he's like, all right, well, what am I gonna do here? So then when I saw him relax a little bit, I said relax. But then when he escalated, I said pull up, and we kept repeating that. And eventually, you saw him going backwards, right, into a more sitting position. And I said relax. And then on that last one, you could see where he was kind of, from my perspective, he was hunched like this. But I can tell that as soon as you relaxed, he was going to go completely into passive state there.
So you want to reward
passive.
that by relaxing the leash.
Yes.
When he does
But no praise or?
No praise.
Okay.
Okay, because one, with behavior, it's expected that he doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so like humans aren't praised for like not running the red light.
Yeah.
It's expected you don't run the red light. And if you run the red light, you get consequence, right? It's the same thing for dogs. So the other issue is praise tends to stimulate the brain. It activates, okay? What we want is calm. We want passive. So if you're always, how'd you say, praising them for stuff, even though it's like, oh yeah, he stopped, you're just creating this mindset again, which is much more easier to trigger than this mindset, okay? But because you have nervous dog, you know, it looks like 0 to 10, but with training, he starts to learn, I don't need to be 0 to 10. So we call in training passive dogs or thinking dogs. Stimulated dogs are reactive dogs. Okay, stimulated dogs that are already excited in the world, are trigger much more easily because they're already elevated. Just like with humans. Have you ever had a day where like maybe you got heard a couple of bad things, and then you get to work and you hear another bad thing? You're just like, right?
Yeah.
Same thing for the dog.
Yeah.
Okay, so is this all making sense?
Yes.
So with these tools,
To you, Em?
Yeah, me and Winnie have the same personality.
So we incorporate prong collar. We don't use it a whole lot anymore, okay? Because it takes a bit of technical skill. With reactive dogs, owners tend to already be like this because they're so used to seeing their dog be reactive. They tend to walk like this, okay? So then we have constant pressure on the dog. So think of pressure as communication. Growing up, there was a thing called peer pressure, right? Have you guys ever been on the expressway where you're driving and someone's like really close to your bumper, right? They're putting spatial pressure on you, and you may either switch lanes, speed up, do nothing, or brake check, right? So they're saying, hey, get out my way. Whether or not you do is a completely different thing. But that pressure they're putting on your bumper is to motivate you to do something. Same thing for the dog. Right now, you use what we would call leash pressure, okay? Even though it's on a harness, it was still using pressure by pulling it up and creating this motion. But the moment we felt him relaxing, we were releasing that pressure. That is conversation, okay? So the prong collar gives us the ability to communicate via pressure, what I'll call biting pressure, a negative pressure because it is uncomfortable. So dog goes, okay, if I lunge at this dog, that negative pressure turns on, but if I don't lunge at the dog, it doesn't turn on.
Okay.
What happens if I don't lunge at the dog? Nothing happens with negative pressure. So now the dog goes, oh, I can avoid negative pressure by not being reactive, but then also nothing happened with the dog. Does that make sense? In order for him to rationalize that the dog that he doesn't like isn't a threat, he has to experience that happening without being reactive and seeing nothing happening with the dog. Does that make sense? You gotta remember, your dog is instinctual, he's primal. When you go out into the world and you walk your dog and you see people walking their dogs, you know those are just other people in the area walking their dogs and enjoying this nice beautiful day in the middle of what should be winter, right? He does not. He goes out and he goes, that's a potential threat. That's maybe a threat. I don't like the way that guy's hat looks, right? That's maybe a threat. So logically, he doesn't understand the world, okay? You as a human understand the world. So we have to give him direction to help him understand you don't need to be like this or feel like this. Everything is fine.
Yeah.
And that's how we start to resolve the reactivity. So when people talk about confidence, like, yes, to a degree, it's confidence, but it's usually not confidence in the way that people think. You know, it's not confidence about like tolerating the harness or anything like that.
Are you saying confidence in the dog or the owner?
Well, there's confidence in the owner as in like being a competent handler, right? Because if you're a good handler, it does, in my opinion, provide security for the dog,
Yeah.
right? Because you're giving direction,
Yeah.
right?
Like, I've got you covered.
Yes, because if you're the one telling him what to do, technically speaking, if a situation arises, you would be in charge of that situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But sometimes people get dogs as a form of protection. So I have a case like this right now. It's a pit bull. She's also she's fear based. Um, I was talking to the owner, and she's like, "What if she growls at someone and I like it because it's protection?" I go, "Well, technically, because with the methods that we're using, we have that ability." I was like, "But it's more protection for a person to see your dog well trained than it is to see your dog untrained, because they don't know how well trained your dog is." Does that make sense? Because she's like, "Well, I don't want to correct the dog for every little growl." I'm like, "Right, but now you have liability. Because if the dog one day decides to go beyond the growl and it lunges and bites someone, you now have a potential lawsuit on your hands right there, right?" So she's like, "Oh, I guess that's true." I said, "Yes." I'm like, "Trust me, you want the control, but people will perceive that's a well-trained dog, and they don't know exactly how much training that dog has. It's a natural diversion for people." Does that make sense? So it's a common thing that I come across where people are like, "Oh, but I got this dog for protection." I go, "Sure, but your dog's not built for it."
I didn't get him for protection.
No.
I didn't think so because of his breed, but those are things that I come across. But if that person is a competent handler and she's establishing structure and telling the dog what to do and what it can't do, a lot of those issues start to go away because the dog goes, "Okay, I don't have to worry about protecting us anymore." Right? Because you're the one that's now in charge. It's like with kids. Like me, I'm the oldest of 4 kids. If my mom and dad were home, if something were to happen, mom and dad would take care of it.
Yeah.
Right? If dad was out at work and mom was home, something happened, I would expect mom would take care of it. If mom and dad were gone, maybe grocery shopping, because carrying 4 kids to the grocery store, this is a lot of work, and I was now responsible. If something happened, technically speaking, it would be on me. Right? So when I was old enough, my mom was like, "Okay, I'm going to have you watch the kids." But I had to be old enough,
Yeah.
So, because then I would have good judgment or better judgment by that point. Dogs are the same way, So like, when you're walking with your dog, if you're not giving rules, boundaries, limitations, and corrections and stuff, he's thinking, "All right, well, if you're not going to do that, somebody has to." That's me.
So could this explain why he's gotten more reactive or things like that as time's gone on? Because like when probably a month into when we got him, he wasn't. I don't know. I just remember one walk and we walked to like Palmer Square, so there's a lot of like dogs and stuff around there.
Yeah.
And he didn't react to a single dog.
So there's a reason for that, or a couple of reasons potentially. First reason is it takes dogs roughly 2 weeks to a month to settle in.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're in those 2 to 4 weeks, they're establishing the hierarchy, right? So that's why, again, that first impression is so important. So if like right away when you took this dog, you were just like, "Nope, not going to do that. Nope, not going to let you do that. Nope, we're going to do this now. You're going to go for a walk," right? You'd have a completely different dog. Okay. The other thing we also have as a variable is the harness. So I get clients who've got their dogs at 2 months. They're puppies. Love everyone and everything. They walk the puppy in a harness. And now the puppy sees the dog. They pull on the harness to keep the puppy away from the dog so that the dog doesn't annoy or puppy doesn't annoy the dog. And they do that over and over and over. And now the puppy goes, "You know what? Every time I see a dog, I feel that negative tension on my chest," right? So now the dog starts to go from friendly to frustrated because they can't greet or get to the other dog. Frustration then becomes agitation. Agitation then can become aggression. So people are unintentionally making their dogs aggressive to other dogs by walking them on a harness that first year of their life. It's super common. We see it all the time. Okay, so that's another variable, or a mixture of all of those. Genetics as well. What happens or has happened in this past, I would say, doesn't matter. And he's a good example because again, we have 2 different relationships here.
Nature versus nurture.
Yeah, you see that? So I think this is great because it just goes to show that the way you approach things can really change the outcome.
Because he's feeling that energy, right? What they're
My own anxious energy.
Yeah, and typically and as a human, I mean, it's perceived as good. The caring, nurturing. I love my dog. I want to give my dog the best life. But to the dog, it's weak energy. You see that? And again, super common because that's people's first impression typically. Oh, this dog maybe he was abused. Oh, he was homeless for 6 months. Oh my God, right? So they do all these things to, make the dog feel better or make them actually feel good about, I'm doing something for this dog. And then they turn around and like, this dog's an asshole. Like, why is it an asshole to me? I'm the one that provides the most love. I go, yes, you are as a human, but the dog perceives it as weakness. and it's not helping the relationship. Super common.
Yeah,
Okay, does that all make sense?
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. So I'm not saying to be mean to your dog. You know, I love my dogs, but at the same time, if they get out of line, I correct them, just like any other dog. I have an 8-pound Chihuahua who gets corrected, the same as any other dog. I have a 60-pound Pit Bull that would also get corrected if she gets out of line. I treat them the same. You know, size to me doesn't matter. They're both dogs. It's all the psychological component. And my Chihuahua actually bullies my Pit Bull. You know, she'll have a bone, he'll go over and like literally sit in front of her and just take the bone from her.
It's the little guy complex.
Yeah, and I allow it because physically she could kill him. So mentally she needs to be weaker.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because of that discrepancy in size. Okay, so I empower the little one over the bigger one because she does have more power over him. So I allow things like that to happen. But there's also times where I'll step in and go like, no, you're not going to do that. So she doesn't always feel like, oh, like this guy's always a bully. Sometimes dad will step in.
And you don't see that as like wishy-washy for the dog, where sometimes I can do this, sometimes I can't?
Because dogs don't understand that concept like humans do. Like, you know, like growing up, if my mom let my younger brother, who's like 7 years younger than me, have a cookie but not me, I would have that understanding. Like, why does he get a cookie and I don't? Dogs don't. Dogs just go, okay, today you disagree? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I guess, you know, we need training on how to deal with them.
So the way to give a a rough idea of how this could look, okay, is one, reviewing counter conditioning stuff. I'd probably send you some videos and say you're gonna apply this to his collar and stuff. Maybe even recommend you pick up a slip leash in the meantime, to make it easier for you to loop him and stuff.
Do you fear that he'll slip out of that?
He shouldn't, as long because they typically come with a tab that keeps the slip secure.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
slip it on and then you can kind of.
Yep.
Because
Okay.
he's backed out of a harness.
So you can't back it off a slip
Okay.
unless you were to fit it extremely loose, where it's like hanging off the neck.
I just thought the slip leash kind of wasn't secured, like it could get loose as you're walking, but you can.
There's tabs that keep it in
Okay.
place. Correct. Yeah. You know, we could do that while we're doing, you know, the counter conditioning stuff, or you can pick up some molding gloves. Like, it can go any number of ways. Okay. The biggest thing that I see being an issue is obviously we're trying to correct the reactivity and the leash pulling, which requires the remote collar. Okay. Because the remote collar provides consequence, or is an aversive, because he already naturally has an aversion to you putting something on the neck, right? When he goes, hey, oh, I know what that thing does. I definitely don't want that around my neck. It's gonna be a little bit more complicated there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, you know, going back again to Teddy, that little dog, that's what she struggled. Like, she couldn't get past that. So I was like, I can't help you, you know? And I tell everybody the same thing. Oh, again, I can only take as far as you're willing to go. But there's things that we have. Because I look at my job as to help your dog, but also prevent you from getting bit. Okay, so I usually provide a couple of options, and I go use what's going to work best for you or work best for the moment. Because sometimes one thing doesn't work, but another thing will. Okay, and sometimes it's just like you can do all the counter conditioning in the world, and the dog goes, I just don't like that thing, right? And then it becomes a more of a it is what it is approach, which is I'm going to put this on you. We're going to do the training. We're going to have an enjoyable walk, and it is what it is, right? And you just push through the nonsense, and eventually he learns. Okay. I can either make life harder or easier. I can make life harder by being resistant, being a bully, or whatever, but you still get your way. Or I can make it easier where you just put this thing on and we go for a walk and I just behave myself. And life's a lot simpler. Does that make sense? So once we can do the collar stuff, the first thing that we always teach is leash walking, which is heel. Leash reactivity and leash pulling are the two most common things that our clients struggle with. So it's heel is the first, almost always the first thing that we cover. So we're already tackling that from the get-go, okay? The reason why heel is so important is it's, most people in the city of Chicago walk their dogs 3 times a day, 7 days a week. So that's 3 times a day, 7 days a week, you get to practice this exercise. Now I know it's nice out today. I don't know if it's gonna get colder again, but just keep in mind that if you are training, your training is gonna be outside for those walks, okay? So I'm not sure how he is with the cold. Is he
Um,
fine? Is he?
the only time we ever had a little bit trouble when it was like -20, and we got him little boots, and
Okay.
then he could go out, but
Okay.
it was just his feet that were bothering him.
Okay. So
But,
like, you know, I don't expect you to walk your dog for 20 minutes when it's -degrees outside, but
Yeah.
definitely when the weather's nice enough, we want to be on this exercise.
Oh yeah, he's out walking like at least 5 times a day, 4 or 5 times a day.
Okay.
But it's like, given this situation, when he's been with them, they've, to try to go out has been a problem to get him in the.
I've just been leaving the past few days. I've just been leaving the harness on, like all
Sure.
the time.
Yeah, makes sense to avoid the interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I'm not opposed to that. Like when
And
you
to
start.
put him in the crate, don't you need to take it off? Because we're afraid he'd get.
Yeah, I mean,
hung up
if
there.
he looks like he's an escape artist or something, then yes. If he's been fine in the crate and not doing that, then technically I think he should be fine. But, you know, do use your better judgment, because I wouldn't want to give you advice and then you're like, oh, Jesse said it, and then something happens,
Yeah.
right? But I would typically, if a dog's going to be an escape artist or like have big issues with the crate, like you would already be like, this is also on the top of our list. But it sounds like he gives a little bit of a.
Yeah, I mean, he's already outsmarted me with the crate. Like last 2 nights ago, I put his food in the back of the crate,
Mhm.
and he walked in,
Mhm.
and then I shut the door.
Mhm.
And then the next day, I tried to do the same thing,
Mhm.
and he would try and slip in,
And then
then
slip out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So,
And so yeah, so like that's also something that you could use to your advantage, right? Is the food thing again. But then if he doesn't eat in the crate, then he doesn't eat. Then you can use that, like kind of like with putting on the harness. It's the same thing, but now you're using the crate for that.
would I ever just put his food in the crate for just normal meals?
Every meal.
And then without it then being he gets closed in it, but just like to get him used to going
I
in
close
there
it.
and eating it.
Because it's again psychological. Where he goes, I don't mind going in the crate. I just don't want to be locked in the crate.
Mm-hmm.
So then what happens is you close the gate and the dog doesn't eat. Then you open the gate and the dog comes out and you'll see where they'll grab food and they'll come out and they'll eat it outside, right? So it's not that he doesn't want to eat, it's that he just doesn't want to eat with the gate closed. So then I go, well, if you don't eat with the gates closed, I'm going to pull up your leash. Yep. Almost. Now relax a little. Yep. There you go. It's the gate closed that puts him under stress.
Yeah.
So then I keep repeating that, and eventually he goes, you know what, the only way I'm going to get to eat is if I learn to eat with that gate closed. It's the same concept.
Because I'm sure if you put him in there, close the gate, he'd eat it in like 30 seconds. I mean, he eats really fast.
Mhm.
So then.
And if he doesn't, it means his stress levels are up.
Okay.
It happens.
Oh, okay.
Where a dog won't touch their food as long as the gate is closed. But if he did eat, then that's good. Because like, he's just learned the game, you know? But the kennel thing is actually an easy thing for us to address.
Really?
Okay, yeah, with the remote collar. Everything's would be simpler. The biggest issue I think we're going to have is simply once he's learned what the collar does, is putting the collar on.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I think that's most likely going to be where our biggest problem is going to be.
Yeah.
So that's why, you know, if we get a dog like him that we have to train here, that's why we have the thermal gloves. Because I'm like, I'm being paid to train you, and this is going to happen. So here we go, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really worried about the counter conditioning because I have multiple dogs I need to train, right? But for my clients, I do counter conditioning because it is beneficial, and you're only training one dog, whereas I might be training 6 dogs here. So, so yeah, the first class is going to be heel, leash walking stuff. I don't need to touch your dog. I coach you through everything. Okay. If he's being dramatic, if he's being resistant, if he's being defensive, if he's trying to bite the leash and all that stuff, I work you through everything. Okay. But I can only work you through it if you follow the instructions. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I give you your homework and I go rinse and repeat 3 times a day, 20 minutes each time. I'll see you in a week. You come back week 2. You give me feedback. Hey Jesse, it's as you predicted. He was having a hard time with the collar. We picked up the thermal gloves. We got it on Wednesday. And the next 4 days we were able to train. I go, perfect. Okay. And then we work on heel part 2. If there's any lingering reactivity, you might have like, hey, you know, once we got the collar on him on the walks, he was 50% less reactive. I go, great, we've already made progress, right? Work on the second half of heel, maybe make a couple of tweaks, give you your homework, go off, rinse and repeat. You come back, more feedback. Getting better with putting the collar on, still doesn't like it, but it's easier, great, progress. Or maybe you feel like it's static, or maybe you feel like it's more difficult. And then I ask you about reactivity, and you go, you know what, reactivity is at least my worries right now. I'm really bothered by the collar thing. I go, okay, let's work on the collar thing today. Okay, we see if he shows the same behavior here. Funny enough, with that the client that I mentioned earlier, when she showed up the second class, she couldn't collar him because of the drama. I collared him no problem. Because the first time I let him do his thing, he didn't work. I put the collar on. We trained anyway. So when she came back to second class and she's like, here, she's like, I can't put it on him. I just grabbed him, put it on. She's like, how did you do that? And I said, because I did it last week. But she's like, but he won't let me put it on. And I go, because you won't let him let you put it on.
Because she's afraid.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like an 8-pound, literally an 8-pound, 10-pound dog.
So that's when you need the gloves, right?
But
so
still, psychologically, she just wasn't willing to do it. You know, so but there's things to keep us safe. It's just, you know, psychologically, if the human goes, I just don't want to do that, then I go, I can't help now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just don't want them to be afraid of getting bitten, and that's why they can't do it.
For sure. Yeah. No, my job is to give you all the insight to work around that stuff.
Yeah.
By still getting what you want. But if the concern, she was just too concerned about the dog.
Yeah.
Because I told her what to do.
Yeah.
She just didn't want to do it because she didn't want to put the dog in that situation. I go, but that's why you can't collar him.
Yeah.
Because she cared too much about how the dog felt.
Yes.
You know.
I think that's
Yeah.
definitely.
So definitely first two classes on heel. Let's say the collar thing, you work past it because he's like, okay, like you're not going to let me get away with this, and you're struggling with reactivity. Then the third class is I go and grab one of our dogs. I come out, we do a controlled context reactivity class to teach you how we work through it. And then I go rinse and repeat. Okay, and then after that, it really comes down to what you're wanting from your dog, right? Because you have the current issue of touch sensitivity, leash reactivity, leash pulling, right? And the kennel stuff. So then, like, let's say class 4, you go, everything's going really well, we're making progress, but we still have problems with the kennel. I go and grab a kennel, I bring it out, I go, let's work on the kennel today. Okay, and I show you how to do that. And you go off, rinse and repeat. You come back, class 5, what would you want to work on today? Okay. In my book, every dog should know how to walk on a leash and recall, come when called. Okay.
Yeah.
The last thing, which is optional, would be what's called duration work or place command. So, for example, he's laying on that mat there. Is we also can put that under command where if I tell dog, go to your bed, they're not going to move for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, you decide. Okay? So if you have guests come over and you just want him to leave the guests alone, you send him to his dog bed, he's not going to move while your guests are there. Okay?
The barking when the people come in. Is
That's a separate thing.
That's, okay.
So technically, yes, you could use that command, but it's not my ideal approach. Instead, what I do is I show you how to correctly invite people into your home. Okay? Him barking at people is a security thing.
Yeah.
Bark, 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 somebody is here. Okay? The issue is you have a nervous dog. So I'm sure you've been to people's houses where you hear the bark, you walk in, and the dog goes, oh, it's you. And they just switch gears, right? They're just excited to see you. So they still alert, but when they see it's a human, because they just love people, they just switch gears and go, I love people. Because you have a nervous dog, he barks, he's being territorial, he's alerting both you and them, there's a dog here. But when they enter, since he's being territorial, territorial means I might need to protect the home. But then he goes, but I'm also a nervous dog and I'm not built to protect the home. And then they get stuck. Okay, now it's the territorial behavior intertwined with the nervousness. And then now the dog either has a hard time settling down, or when things settle down, like 15 minutes later, somebody moves too quickly and the dog starts barking again because nothing ever fully resolved the dog and said, you need to relax. Okay, so typically with that class, it's usually an in-home where I come over, show you how to address the situation. It's not so much about obedience, it's more so just understanding how do you correctly bring people into the home when you have a dog that's nervous or territorial.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I was telling her, like, if my boyfriend's home with him and I'm coming up the stairs, I'll be fumbling with the keys and the door, and then he's just waiting on the other side of the door, like waiting for me to come in. But if I'm home with him and my boyfriend's coming up the stairs, he'll start barking at him like before I can even hear him.
Yeah, it's interesting that he's doing it because your boyfriend's a part of the immediate family.
Yeah.
But it's not uncommon.
It's the same with my husband. He sees him all the time. He will then lay down next to him and let him pet him.
Yeah.
So
It's the initial thing.
Yeah. That's just the nervousness.
Yeah.
And would you suggest, like, if she has people over to her apartment, he's bark, 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 she picks him up and holds him? Or sometimes she's met them downstairs?
Right.
I meet them downstairs typically.
Yeah, because that's a workaround.
or if if we're having people over, or like when we had Thanksgiving, whatever, like I would wait outside, and then once the place filled up with people, then I'd bring him in, and he was fine.
Yeah, because the issue is the knock. That's the trigger. So when you meet people outside, you're avoiding that trigger.
He'll still bark at them like out coming in, but it's not as bad, you know?
Yeah.
And then everybody wants to pet him.
That
Did you
doesn't
just
help.
say, just leave him?
Ignore him.
Ignore him?
In the beginning. So like, can I help you build his social circle? 100%. Right? It just comes down to, is that a part of what you want to achieve? Okay? So typically with nervous dogs, one, it's how do we invite people in correctly? But then also it's how do we introduce them to people correctly? And then it's how do we get people to introduce themselves correctly? So nervous dogs tend not to like loud, big, boisterous energy. So people are like, oh my God, look how cute he is, right?
Yeah.
Because the dog doesn't like how big the energy is, okay? So that's also part of it. So I usually tell my clients, don't expect your dog to like these types of energies, but they will learn to acclimate at some point. But then you'll notice like, oh yeah, like the real passive people, like he's warmed up to right away because they're passive and neutral. You see that? They're more of his energy. So once you start to understand that, like there's going to be limitations, of course. Like I can't make every dog like everyone and everything. That's just not realistically possible.
Yeah.
But we can achieve a lot if we push for more.
Yeah.
And it's just stuff that you do as you live your life with your dog.
Yeah.
You know, like I tell everybody, there's no point in having people over 5 times a week if normally you just have a person come over once a month, right? Because you're going to go, in the beginning, you're going to do all this work to have people come over, but realistically speaking, it's not what it's going to be. So when you go back to normalcy, the dog to some degree is going to regress because you're not doing 5 times a week, you're doing once a month. So I just tell people, as you live your life with your dog, you do these things as they come up. And eventually you'll start to see the dog open up over time. It just won't be, you know, very quickly.
And if it comes to like, they have to go somewhere, they get him to where he's not growling at them to get to the crate. I mean, can you just shove him in the crate?
No, he's going to go in on, because I told
But I
him
mean,
to.
until then.
Oh, sure,
while
yeah.
you're-
Yeah, you could
You know,
just,
that's no harm in doing it that way. Like, you're going in.
no. Yeah, you could
I mean, I tried to do that yesterday. Like,
And
I
then-
tried to get him, he would get in halfway through the food, and I tried to, like, you know, not kick him, but just use my foot to, like,
push him in.
push him in, and he skittered out of it.
Okay,
But maybe I just wasn't forceful enough.
yeah, because I would just be like,
Just
"You're
do
in."
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just have to be empowered too.
Yeah, you're not being mean to your dog.
Yeah.
So, if you went, God damn it, dog, get here. That's being mean to the dog.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're just like, nope. Even if you're having to put some force behind it, it's the energy of which you're doing it.
Yeah.
Right? It's like I was raised old school, I was spanked. And I'm thankful for it because I'm disciplined. If I wasn't disciplined that way, I probably wouldn't have a successful business or anything because having a successful business requires discipline, right? But I've talked to people, like friends and stuff, about being spanked growing up, and it's funny because some of them were like, oh, your parents hit you? And I'm like, well, I don't view it as being hit. I just view it as I was spanked, like, and I did things that warranted it. And if I didn't do those things or made those decisions, I wouldn't have been spanked in the first place. Does that make sense? So dogs are physical creatures. If you saw another dog correct, for example, like on YouTube, if you look up a dog correcting another dog, protecting puppies, you'll see a few videos where there's one of the mother with the puppies, the dad comes over and they literally snap at the dad. And the dad goes and just walks away. That's a correction, right?
Dad dog or the dad person?
The dad dog.
Okay.
Yeah, so mom dog bites dad dog saying don't come near the puppies.
Oh.
And the dog just walks away. So no one would go, oh, she abused the dad. They would just say, oh, that was a correction. She's establishing a boundary. She doesn't want him near the puppies, even though it's the dad. It's just, it is what it is, right? But the moment a human tries to correct a dog using either a prong collar, remote collar, blah, 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 all of a sudden it becomes abuse, right? And I go, it's about the intention. I'm sure there are absolutely people out there that misuse these things and they do it in an abusive way, right? But if he is snarling at you and you tap him on the collar to correct him and go, you're not going to snarl at me, and he stops snarling at you, and then you go on peacefully with him, that to me is not abusive. You simply just did to him what he would do to you if you continue to push the conversation.
And again, you correct him with the e-collar thing. And then there's no praise. It's just like,
No.
that's just what's expected to.
Like my mom never praised me for not talking back.
Yeah.
It's just you don't talk back to your mom.
Yeah.
You know, like it's the same thing for dogs. Praise, for example, if we say sit and the dog sits, oh, good boy, right? Because he performed a task. We can do some praise there, right? But to some degree, there also has to be expectation of I expect you just to just do this.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because think of this relationship as like parent-child, student-teacher, cop-civilian. Like it's an authoritative relationship. But people get dogs for companionship.
She said that to me.
Yeah.
She said, you want to raise a brat.
Yeah. Because what you want is people tend to get dogs for companionship, but in a friendship, there is no assertion of authority. Like my friends don't tell me what to do, and I don't tell my friends. We're all adults, so go ahead and pull them in, pull them up. Yep. Now, me, because I own my business, I have employees. I tell them what to do, but they don't tell me what to do. They might ask me for help and say, "Hey, Jesse, can you help me with this?" And I might say, "Sure." Or I might say, "No, ask somebody else." Right? That's the relationship. So, again, it's just the personality type of dog that you got.
Yeah.
Is you could have gotten another dog and do all the same things, and everything's completely fine.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I wouldn't look at this and like blame yourself. It's just this is super common.
Yeah.
In terms of length of time and stuff, so we have 3, 6, 9, and 12-week programs. I would suggest you do an in-person because could we do a daycare trainer or boarding train? Absolutely. But the problem isn't here. The problem is there. Okay. If it was just leash reactivity and basic obedience and you could collar up no problem, you would have the additional option of a daycare or boarding train because it's just train the dog, fix some outward problems, which is easily teachable. But here it's a relationship thing.
Could I drop him off for daycare in between the in-person if I'm like going to work? Because sometimes I go to work and I go this direction,
Sure.
like 2 times a week.
Sure. He's welcome to come.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. And then we would reinforce training whenever you bring him. So if you started training, you brought him with his collar and stuff. If he like was reactive, we would correct him for that. Like all the stuff that I teach you, we would reinforce here.
Yeah.
Okay. If he tried to, be snippy with me or whatever, we're trying to collar him up, we would push through and go like, nope, you're not going to do that. So now we're also to a degree disempowering him, where he's like, okay, tried it with her, didn't work. Tried it with Jess, didn't work. Tried it with Asher, didn't work. Tried it with Mariano, didn't work. Trying it with Mom, now she's not letting it work, right? Now you're disempowering, which may sound bad, but it's not, because by empowering, this is what we have now.
Yeah.
Okay. It's for the in-person, it's once a week for an hour, typically recurring times. I would put you at minimum at 6. If you wanted to do more, obviously more than welcome to. If we did 6, I look at it as kind of like a bare bones, focusing on just the necessities. Again, heel has to happen. That's 2 classes. We have the kennel. That's a 3rd class. We have potentially touch sensitivity. That could be a 4th class. We have leash reactivity. That could be the 5th class. And now that leaves the 6th class as kind of a variable. Okay? Because I'm focusing on the necessities. Let's say you did 9 classes. It's the same layout, but now we have more time to accomplish things.
Yeah.
So we could accomplish recall. We could accomplish stationary control. So that's class 6, class 7. That still leaves us class 8 and 9 as variables. So if we need to review something, maybe you want to review a reactivity again, we can have another class on reactivity. But once you understand how this stuff works, it's pretty straightforward. Okay. And then 12 classes is really for the clients that want full control of their dog. It's typically when we want off-leash control. So sit, stay, down, come, place, heel. So 6 commands that can all be built to an off-leash level. The only command that has to be off-leash reliable is recall. Come when I call you, right? Otherwise, it's pointless. Every other command is if the owner wants, okay? So a 12-week program is someone that like does everything with their dog. They go hiking with their dog, they go to restaurants, they take them to their friend's house, they take them to work, like they do all these things with their dog that they want the most control, okay? Now, because your dog has behavior issues, that acts as a variable. So what that means is in that 12-class program, we may not get all 6 commands to that level of training, but we're going to get a good chunk of them, plus this behavior under control, okay? When we have the shorter programs, if the collar thing takes me 3 classes to get you over the issue, well, that's 3 out of 6 classes now that we've used on the collar, right? Yeah. Every case is different. The good thing is you have a smaller dog, which does make it easier. So far, in terms of like his defensiveness level, I would say it's probably lower, mild to low, just because if it was more serious, like you would know.
Yeah.
You're like
Because
this.
he'll still, like, if he doesn't, he's in the yard, he's chewing on a stick that I think he's doing,
I can take
eating it.
anything out of his mouth.
Mhm.
I have no
Yeah.
fear of that.
Sure. So
And
not
he'll
a
do the
resource guard.
roll over and kind of
Yeah.
and not get guardy
Yeah.
over it. So I figure that's good.
Yes. The you mentioned earlier if he's like laying down and you go to pet him or something, that sometimes he'll growl, right?
More if you kind of nuzzle up to him.
More if I actually
Okay.
like put some weight on him.
Okay. So because you mentioned like the dog shouldn't do that, right? Or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I said kind of to a degree, right? So not all dogs are cuddlers.
Yeah.
You know, same thing with people. You know, there's some people that are close talkers, some people that need more space when you talk, right? And then even in relationships, like there's some people that are just more needy. They need that kind of constant physical touch, and there's more people that are just kind of like I need some space and they're a balance, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing for dogs. So I am very much a balance of what the dog needs and wants and what the human needs and wants. Okay. I can't make your dog a cuddler,
Yeah.
right? In the sense of like you coming into a space. However, if it's like, but I want this dog to cuddle with me, what we will do is just flip the way that we do it. So I wouldn't come into his space because now I'm encroaching on him. Instead, I'd be like, hey, you get over here. And I like kind of like a recall to a degree where I tell the dog to come to me and I'm like, you're going to be here and I'm going to pet you. So I'm telling the dog to come to me as opposed to me going to the dog. Because you want to think also, if you're like, oh my God, you look so cute while you sleep right now, and you go to pet him, he's like, leave me alone when I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
You see that? Like, because you're coming into his space while he was in a resting state. So I can see why the dog would have some disagreement there.
Yeah.
But when you flip it and you go, you know what? I know you're sleeping, but you need to wake up and get over here. It changes the mindset of the dog. So now the dog is like, oh, you're telling me to come to you now. And you're going to pet me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's just how you can still get what you want. I just can't make it to where he would be welcoming of you coming into his personal space like that.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, like and we also look at how the dog approaches it. I had a client, it was a consult, they never moved forward with training, but the lady said the dog was unpredictable. And they explained everything to me, and everything was around the dog being on the couch and them wanting to cuddle the dog, to the point that the dog bit the wife in the face. There was quite a few stitches. And I was like, that all sounds perfectly predictable to me. And they're like, what do you mean? They're like, we're being nice, trying to give our dog love, and he's over here just becoming aggressive. I go, yeah, like that's predictable. You're seeing it as unpredictable because you don't see any ill intent in what you're doing. And I agree, you're not being ill intent. You were wanting to show love. But your dog isn't that kind of dog, and your dog is setting a boundary saying, I don't like this. And you kept pushing him to the point that one day he decided, I need to now bite you in the face to let you know I really don't like this. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that dog gave, to a degree, healthy, because it was growl, 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 growl. But they kept pushing, and eventually the dog goes, you know what, today's the day I'm going to teach you a lesson. And then it escalated.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but to me, I go, I don't put that on the dog because he gave you plenty of opportunity to just back off and you just ignored him,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What about if there's not like me, but what about if there's what I worry about if he's in a situation where there's like a baby involved or something like that?
Sure.
Would recall then work for that?
yeah, so there's a couple things there. So I've worked with plenty of families with dogs. It can go any number of ways. Okay. So I always tell my clients, don't worry until you're there. Okay.
Yeah.
So I had a case where the dog was extremely dog and human aggressive. Went through 2 trainers, and by the age of 5 months, and both trainers had put the dog down. I came in by the time the puppy was 6 months. Okay. And I was like, this dog is legit. It was a blue heeler. We did the training.
Legit good or legit bad?
Legit bad. Like
Yeah.
he meant it.
Uh-huh.
He meant it. Both towards humans and dogs. We did the training. They were able to have guests come over. He became tolerant of people and stuff like that. Fast forward a bit, they had a baby. And they right away, they're like, Jesse, we're scared, right? And I'm like, all right, give him a call, give him my baby spiel. And I always tell people and encourage space, coexistence. Everybody's always like, put the dog with the baby type of stuff. And I said, don't do that, coexistence, right? And they followed my instructions. And then by the time the baby was walking around, and there was never any conflict, but by the time the baby was walking around and like playing with toys, the dog absolutely loves her kid. Like never, and this was, I trained the dog in 2019, so the dog was like 5, 6 years old now. Never an issue, loves the kid, loves kids in general.
Mm.
But you wouldn't have known that when you saw him as a puppy, like where he was extremely aggressive.
Yeah.
I've also had dogs that love people and love everybody. And as soon as the baby came in, the dog started to guard the baby from the parents. I've had dogs guard the baby and the family from outsiders. I've had dogs start displaying leash reactivity, all because of the presence of a baby coming into the home. It shifts the dynamic. Okay. The good news is, because the baby is a part of the regular day-to-day, in the beginning we just push coexistence, and the dog goes, okay, you're here to stay. But because we push coexistence, it gives the dog plenty of time to acclimate to the child.
What if it's someone else's baby, like say my sister or like my friend? Would that be something? Because like I don't want to have to be nervous about him being around. Like I guess he hasn't been around little kids, so I just don't know.
Sure. So even so, it's not uncommon for a dog to be wary of children or nervous, because kids, excuse me, tend to be awkward, especially when they're learning how to walk and crawl. Dogs and puppies mature very quickly. By the time they're 8 weeks, right, they're running around, they're chasing each other, all that stuff. They mature very fast. So for dogs, humans, it's weird because we mature very slow, right? So in the beginning, it's not uncommon to see growling or like the dog walking away when the kid starts crawling or walking around. Like it's all normal. What we do want to be careful of is if he's laying down and the kid's crawling over to him, he gets up, he walks away, he goes and lays down somewhere else. Kid crawls over, goes over there. He does it again. Kid crawls over, and dog goes, okay, I can't escape you. So I'm going to just teach you the way that I know and nip you to teach you to leave me alone, right? Because that's what they would do to a puppy. Problem is, kid will understand that, not until they're much older, right? But that's where the human would be stepping in, right? Either addressing the child and or addressing the dog and or addressing both, okay? So do we have exercises that can help him like kids? 100%. But I can't make him like kids, right? Or let's say he's fine with some kids because they're passive, but again, nervous dog, he might not like certain kids because they're boisterous or erratic, you know? So in those cases, it would be, you know, you could put him in a separate room, kennel him, like it's not gonna help or hurt, like it's just a way to avoid potential problem there.
Yeah.
But that's one of the more common things that I see is that the humans are ignoring the dog's responses.
Yeah.
And then the kid keeps pushing the dog, and eventually the dog bites the kid. That's not aggression. That's a correction. Okay.
And do you think they should put him in the crate more and more, or to get him to be like this is fine, or?
So his issue is going into the crate. Once we resolve that, which is pretty straightforward, there really shouldn't be a problem.
Because right now he doesn't sleep in the crate at night anymore.
Okay.
Is that fine, or?
The only time we care about sleeping in the crate is if there's separation anxiety or the dog has potty issues. If the dog is potty trained and there's no separation anxiety, I don't have an issue with the dog being loose overnight. During the day, if you work from home, I do recommend the dog be crated because we want to create some kind of separation. Otherwise, separation anxiety can happen. But if you leave to work, like even leaving him uncrated while you're gone from home, to me isn't an issue. If he's non-destructive, if he's not having any kind of potty mistakes or anything like that, and he can't get himself into trouble.
I guess we're kind of anticipating he would freak out. I don't know, but you know, be nervous
being loose
and
in the house?
like destroy something. Yeah,
Yeah.
being loose.
Potentially, I'm leaning more towards no, because you're able to crate him and leave him in the crate, correct? Like, you know, when you can get him in there successfully.
Yeah.
Right?
He's like a wild man when he gets out, like excitement.
Yeah.
but-
So if his stress levels when you were leaving were like bad, like it'd be happening in the crate. Where you're like, Jesse, I can't crate this dog because he barks nonstop. He's broken out. He's broken teeth. You know, he's done all the, like I come home and he's standing in a pile of drool. Like it's
Well,
very
there's,
obvious.
Like, we used to have like where there was a mat in the bottom of the crate and he would kind of shred it. So now there's nothing in the crate
Yeah,
when he
that's
goes
fine.
in. Or
He
like,
doesn't need anything.
there was like a bag and he like dragged it in and shredded it.
Yeah.
But like, that's the worst that he's done.
Yeah. That's either boredom or frustration.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I
but
figure empty crate, then there's no worry.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. At some point he's going to get bored and fall asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the issue that you have is just the entry.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all it is. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the collar that we'd recommend, he's like what, 20, 25-ish pounds?
No, he's only 17.
Only 17. Okay. Um, you have two options. Or I guess technically three. So there's with the model of e-collar that we use, there's different output levels depending the size of the dog. Okay. The Doctra 280C, and we'll send you all this information, is meant for a 35-pound dog and under. Okay, so that's the category that he falls in. And then there's a collar meant for a 70-pound dog and under, and a 70-pound dog and over. Okay, so think of them as low, medium, high output. So that means like 60 on the low-powered collar could be 30 on the high-powered collar. You're just getting more through less. Okay. The other big difference is the size of the collars. The 35-pound dog and under collar is obviously much smaller. The 70-pound and under is a bit bulkier. It's a bit bigger of a box. The 70-pound and over, the way it's designed is it's more curved, so it's not as noticeable than the big square box. Okay. The reason why I suggest potentially the other two is because of the leash reactivity, and then the nervous kennel type behavior. So I'm not just factoring in your dog size. I'm factoring in his coat. He's got a little bit of like that kind of terrier coat, right? That wiry, longer hair. We also want to factor in his stress levels. And if he's in a state of reactivity, adrenaline, right? All those things factor in when we're trying to make contact with the collar. I've had dogs where you're maxed out on the collar and they just completely ignore it because they're just either so reactive or they're so stressed out about being in the kennel that it's not enough power to cut through. Okay, having the higher powered collar gives us that window in case we need it to have the power to cut through.
More range.
Yes. So like I had a dog, her name was Georgia, who in 23 was like the worst reactivity case I trained. She had the reactivity level of like a 80-pound dog, okay, and she was only like 20 pounds. So during the consult, because we met at Oz Park, I told the owner, you want the high-powered collar, no questions asked. Owner didn't question it. She believed me. She went and she purchased it, came back, and it took me about 4 to 5 classes to finally fix the reactivity because it was that bad. And this was literally a 20-pound dog. And we ended up needing to use max power on the collar. So it just goes to show it wasn't so much about the dog's physical toughness. It's the dog was so erratic, it wasn't feeling what we were trying to correct. And eventually we broke through it because we had enough and we just kept going and going and going and going. Owner followed my instructions. We cut through all that stuff and then we were able to fully off-leash train the dog. And then the last time I met the owner, she hadn't seen reactivity for like 2 to 3 months, right? But
Is that the 70 and above or are they under
70 and above?
No.
Okay, but I saw the dog's reactivity. Okay, so here I would say if you went with the 2300, it just would look awkward because he's a smaller dog with a big box in his neck, but that's all it really is. Okay, that one runs around 287-ish with tax. The 70-pound and over one runs around 350-ish with tax. Okay, but it looks a little bit more subtle.
The 70 and over, can it go as low as the 35 and under one?
Yes,
if he
like
doesn't
you're
end
like
up needing it.
You're at like 8 to 12 levels.
Okay.
It just means you get more from less. Okay, these collars do last a long time. I had my first batch of e-collars for my personal dogs for about 10 years before they finally crapped out, and then I purchased new ones. The most common thing we see is the battery is a rechargeable lithium battery, so it does crap out at some point. You can either purchase them for $20 and replace them. It's very easy. Or you can send it to Doctra and they'll replace it too for a fee. But it's pretty straightforward in terms of replacing the battery. Okay. The systems do, come with a 1-year warranty. So if something happens in that first year, you can send it to Doctra. They'll fix it for your charge. After the year, they'll give you a quote, charge you a fee. In the meantime, for our clients, if they ever need to borrow a collar, we used to just loan them out, but people were returning collars chewed up and stuff. So now we would charge a fee just to cover in case something comes back damaged. We can replace the parts and all that. Okay. But I would say at minimum, I would do the 70-pound and under one. But if
that's bulkier, you're
it's
saying?
bulkier. And then the other one is curved. It's still large, but since it's curved, it's not as noticeable on the neck. Okay. And when you look at them, because they'll send you the make and models, you can see what I'm talking about.
And the 35 and under is just don't bother?
I wouldn't, because then let's say you purchase it, we do the training, we spend 4 classes trying to work through stuff, and we're struggling. The first thing I'm going to think is like, it's probably the collar. It's too low, you know?
Yeah.
It has happened in the past. So I would say one of the other two. Okay.
And a prong collar,
No.
or we're just doing the...
We're just doing this. If needed, we can incorporate a prong collar. It's usually like if you had a Great Dane, I'd like, let's do a prong with the e-collar because it gives you more leverage. But you have a little guy, so 95% of the time we just do e-collar, but if needed, we may add in the prong.
Okay.
Okay?
And then you take it, it's take off, put on when you're home, or...
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. Okay. Anything else?
I was wondering with the different packages,
Mhm.
can you say you're going to start with 9 and then you're like, wait, we're not where we want to be?
And add
Convert it
more.
to 12, or you're like starting over with payments and...
It's a good question. To be honest with you, if you did 6, for example, because I said at minimum, I would just, at the minimum, do 6. I know I can get the reactivity done, the leash walking stuff done. The collar thing, again, is just the biggest variable that we have, okay? And what was it? The kennel thing we can get done. I'm confident like those 4 things will get done in 6 classes, okay? Now, if you want more, if you want people coming over, if you want socializing with other people so that he learns to have a greater circle of trust, now we're looking at the 9 to 12 program, okay? As long as the owner follows the instructions, I've not had people not leave unhappy. Does that make sense? Like they go, like a lot of times I get a lot more than they were expecting because their ceilings are typically down here and my ceiling is always up here. So I always push for more, okay? Now, the greatest variable is your dog's behavior, right? And with Teddy, clearly the issue was the owner didn't want to push the dog. So that has nothing to do with me. Because I literally called him up to 2nd class, no problem. And she's just like, how did you do that? And I said, because I'm not letting him manipulate me with his behavior, right? That's where things get dicey. Because the human sees it one way, and then they go like, no, this is what it is. It's also why we started recording too. Because we've had people in the past turn around and they're like, no, this is what it is. And they go, no, I have you on video. Here you go.
Yeah.
You know?
So do you suggest like, okay, so they're having trouble getting this collar on them, get them into a small space, or?
So what we would do is if we hit a wall, we would spend a class where I'd most likely go over all the options. And I go and practice, don't come back until you have achieved it, okay? It could take you a week, 3 weeks, 2 months, whatever. But I do it because sometimes it's easy peasy, sometimes it does take a few weeks. So for Georgia, on class 4, I told her, do this, and in practice, email me if you have questions. And it took her 2 weeks before she scheduled her 5th class. And then at the 5th class, she's like, I have not seen reactivity. We finally solved it. I go, great. So once we hit a wall, I won't continue really meeting with you unless you absolutely request it. Instead, I'll give you all the options and say, we're going to try with this option first. Do that for a week. Does it work? No. Try the second option now. Do that for at least a week. Because you can't be changing it up all the time. Because if you're changing it from one day to the next day, you're having inconsistency. Does that make sense? So then I work with you via email, or I'll give you a call or whatever and say, do this, do this, do this. It's once you understand how, I can just kind of explain it to you. And then you go, hey, Jesse, we finally were able to put the collar on, and it was fairly easy. I go, great. Continue doing that for at least another week, because I don't want it to be a fluke moment.
Yeah.
And then you go, hey, we got it. I go, great. Now schedule your 4th class. And then
Let's say
the
they have trouble, they can't get this e-collar on, do this, and we gotta go. We have to go.
Oh yeah, the slip leash.
Slip leash.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. For stuff like that, it would just be like, all right, well, we're probably not going to do much training while we're still actively trying to put the collar on, but you can at least take your dog out to go potty.
And maybe I felt like getting him into a confined space like the bathroom or something, because otherwise it's this chase game, you know, and then you can't
Makes
catch
sense.
him, and then it's all stressful. And
Yeah. The more options the dog has, the more, to a degree, empowered they are. Yeah. So
I feel like do that from the get-go, so you're not like, oh, he's being really good, and we're in the living room, and then he starts playing chase, and then you've got this whole issue.
Yeah.
Just start like, let's go in the bathroom for a second, and we'll put this on, and right.
the way I look at it is as if she can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
That's what I always tell people. I was like, if I can do it, you can do it. If you can't do it, it's because you're not letting yourself do it.
Yeah.
So, but at minimum, I'd say 6. 9 is a nice buffer for a lot of clients, where it's just like right in the middle.
Yeah, like, I would love to be able to take him like to a patio and like have dinner.
Yeah, so that's more of a 9.
Yeah.
If you did 12, because the more classes you buy up front, the cheaper it is per class.
Yeah.
Is let's say you buy 12, we get to class 10, and you're like, Jesse, I'm very happy with what we have. Like, I don't think we're going to use 11 and 12. You're welcome to convert it to credit, and you can use it towards boarding. You can use it towards daycare. I don't care because it's service for service. Okay, we've had clients do that too, where they're unsure of how far they're going to get, but they also would like to have like a cheaper per class rate or whatever, but not lose out on the investment.
Yeah.
So I go, sure. I was like, you can do 12. So if you do 6, and let's say you decide like, wow, this was great. We didn't think we were going to get this far. I want even more, and you purchase another 6. We don't prorate programs.
Okay.
You would purchase the price of 6 because you have to rebook again, because essentially the time that you have, you may not be able to extend it because somebody may have already booked it after you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then you're back in line waiting to be booked, and it might be at a different day or different time. Whereas if you buy 12, and let's say you say Saturday or Sunday at 2 o'clock, whatever, Sunday at 2 o'clock for 12 weeks plus 1, so 13 weeks, that's your time. No one can take it from you.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if we space out things, then of course we adjust to whatever. But then if we come to later on in the program, we get all the stuff done, you're happy with his training, we don't need him to be a circus dog. Come to me when I call you, walk without pulling and not being reactive, and then go here and don't move, which allows you to go to restaurants. We don't have to have sit, we don't have to have down. Heel, come, and place, those 3 things let you do a lot of stuff with your dog.
Yeah.
Okay, the other commands are kind of superficial.
Yeah.
And usually with smaller dogs, people don't do down command because it's awkward because they're lower to the ground.
Yeah.
It's more of like a German Shepherd type of thing. Most people would do something like place. Okay.
Yeah.
So then if you're like, oh yeah, we'll just convert the last classes to credit and then use it towards their boarding, it's perfectly fine. Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
I was just thinking, like, his kind of nonsense behavior that he's doing. Like, if I'm walking to meet my sister to walk, and he's like, he knows her, but he's approaching and he barks, and I'll just kind of say, hey, you're fine, and then we just kind of carry on and he gets over it. That kind of stuff, or do you make a big deal of her saying hi to him, or just kind of carry on and like ignore the whole situation?
So if they present themselves and like, oh hey, right, and then he barks, like you can correct that, right, to teach him like not to blow up.
Yeah.
Now if they're coming like right, now I go, well, you have to factor in that's most likely an energy he's not going to be welcoming to. Now you can still correct them for barking at him, but we just can't make him be accepting of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, she comes up calmly, like,
because part of it is teaching them to come to them, and then part of it is teaching them how to come to him. Not all dogs are the just walk up and pet type of dog.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, that's just genetic. That's just him. So here at my facility, we get nervous dogs, fearful dogs, anxious dogs, aggressive dogs, reactive dogs, right? And we run a quiet kennel because I am, I don't like saying this because it sounds egotistical, but like a master dog trainer. Like I've been doing this for 12, 14 years. Behavior is my specialty. So I can have all these dogs, even dogs that can't coexist with other dogs, coexist here because I know what I'm doing and I teach my staff what to do and they know how to handle these dogs in response. Other places don't know how to do that. So a lot of times they're selective. They only want the friendly dogs, the easy dogs, right? Because the other dogs are 1, liability. 2, they can't even take them out the kennel, right? So now there's other issues there. But because my specialty is behavior, I can have all these different types of personality types be here and coexist peacefully because I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right? So same thing here. I'm essentially teaching you guys, 1, how to control your dog, how to train and have control of your dog, but then also how to live with a dog that's nervous. That's very different than living with a dog that just loves everything and everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so once you have all those pieces, you go, okay, this makes sense. You know, so if you're on the street and someone's like, oh my God, look at that dog with big energy, I would say you have to advocate for him. My dog doesn't like that.
Yeah.
You know, and to me, to your dog, that's competent handler.
Yeah.
Oh, like, you know, they noticed that. I see that big energy. Mom said something.
Yeah.
It stopped. So she must have
Yeah.
taken care. Like that's logic. That's the dog can see and understand that.
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
literally like we just move on and he's fine. You
Yeah.
know, it's just the
It's
initial.
always the initial.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Covered a lot.
Yeah.
So mull it over. You know, so at minimum 6. You're welcome to do more. I would say 9's a nice buffer, especially if you want to do the restaurant thing or whatever.
Yeah.
If you decide you want to go even more and do 12, like I said, you can always convert any leftover classes to credit. We don't have a problem with that. But this, I see this all the time. This is nothing out the ordinary for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Do we call back to set that up or?
So you can email. So Tina is my assistant, but she just had a surgery a few weeks ago, so she's been out of office. So Maria, who was my previous assistant, has now kind of just absorbing and taking. So you've probably been talking to Maria.
I think she emailed me back.
Yeah.
About the consultation. Yeah.
So you can either email her and say, hey, please sign us up. We want to do 9 or 12 or whatever. And then if you give, whoever's going to be a part of the training is welcome to show up. If it's going to be more than 2 handlers, I always prioritize the main 2, and then I'll try to get in when I can with the 3rd. Okay?
Is it you that's going to be doing it?
The training? Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. And so if it's like you and your boyfriend,
Yeah.
ideally the both of you would want to be there.
Yeah.
If it happens, so like the first 2 classes are definitely the most important. There's a lot of information there.
Yeah.
The class on collar conditioning, if needed, or reactivity would also be important. Everything else is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
If you can't make it to one or you can't make it to one, we record the session, so of course I send you the link and so here you go, so you always have it as a reference. Or if you really want both of you guys to be there and you just push back a week, that's not a problem, because remember you do get that priority for those few weeks. But if you keep pushing back and pushing back and pushing back and pushing back, and then it's already been 10 weeks and we're on a 12-week program, we only have 2 to 3 more weeks of that allotted time. So you wouldn't lose your lessons, but you might lose that time slot.
Yeah,
Correct.
that-
Okay. But yeah, anybody who's going to be a part of the training, I always encourage that they come along. So I anticipate you and your boyfriend.
Probably her around,
Sure.
if possible, to have 3.
And then
Is 3 allowed though?
yeah,
Is that,
I don't
okay.
care. I've had as many as 6 people.
Okay.
Okay. But I always prioritize the main 2,
Yes.
Yeah.
and then the 3rd one I'll try to squeeze in. Okay.
Gotcha. But I could observe.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions?
Right away, we should get rid of this harness and go to a collar?
I would keep it for now.
Okay.
Just because with the flat collar, if he's going to be pulling because he is a smaller dog, that pressure on the trachea, I would say once you start training, if you move forward and all that stuff, you'd show up, you'd have a regular flat collar. I suggest the regular, either like the belt buckle style, a flat buckle collar. I don't recommend snap buckles because snap buckles can break apart, or they the collar itself wears and it gets loose and the dog can slip out of it. Whereas a flat buckle, once you fit it, it's not going to get bigger or tighter. Okay.
We have found, even with this, that sometimes we'll look down and one of the rings, it's only leashed
This will
to.
come out, and it'll just be attached to one.
It might be because the ring is catching on the clip and it pushes the clip.
Oh, yeah.
It happened to us too. So it's uncommon, but it does happen. He might even be like on a martingale type collar, which is similar to a slip, where if the dog tries to pull back, it tightens. They designed them because whippets have a small head but a big neck, so collars will slip over a whippet's head. But with the martingale, it'll tighten so they can't escape it. Okay, so that's also a potential option as well.
So in the meantime, if they're gonna have trouble potentially, they should invest in a slip collar just to have it?
Sure.
Or, what do you think? Yeah.
They're like $15-20, you know, or you can just keep them on this and leave the harness on as you have been to avoid the conflict.
Yeah.
That's not a problem either.
Okay.
So
And then is the pricing and everything
on the website.
Okay.
correct. If you go under obedience, you should see a table, and it'll give you the pricing for each program and then what it entails.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
I think so. I'm good. Are you in?
Yeah. Or Sundays, I guess I can talk to Maria about it, but do you typically have availability on
Now I
Sundays?
do, because I was doing Saturdays and Tuesdays
Uh-huh.
because the holidays always a lull because you got Thanksgiving, then you got Christmas, and you got New Year's, so people travel.
Yeah.
Presents, dog training is usually the last thing on people's minds. But then afterwards, we had like 6 people sign up. And then we got more board and trains and daycare trains than we did actual in-persons. So previously my days were Saturday, Tuesday for training because I just didn't have enough to spread out. But now we're moving them all to Saturdays and Sundays. So that's why you got scheduled for today.
Okay.
Yeah. But when you email her, please email her windows of time that anybody who's going to be there would be available.
Yeah.
Right? So if you go Sunday from noon to 5, the 3 of us are available, it makes it a lot easier for her because she has to cross-reference with my calendar.
Yeah.
Okay? So we have a couple other people that are going to be moving from Tuesday over to Sunday. So then having that window is a lot easier because they're going to have windows and she can put people where they would work
Anytime
out
on
best.
Sunday would work, so.
And you could start pretty quickly?
Yep. She goes by the contract. So the faster you get the contract, she'll email it to you back to her. That's how she knows you're serious. Please feel free to ask questions about the contract. But we have had people in the past ask a lot of questions about the contract. And then when they're ready to book, I'm not available. And then they get upset. And we're like, well, it's because it's first come, first serve. And all these people are being booked.
Yeah.
Okay? But it's pretty straightforward when you read it. Some of it is also part of our daycare stuff. So that's why it's longer than just the training or whatever. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And then for starting right away, it's payment in full. And then in terms of your collar, she'll send you the options, which ones I recommend. We sell them here. I don't care where you get them, but I do care that you get the correct collar. And I would be mindful if you do not buy off of Chewy, because Chewy has been sending people the wrong collars. If you buy off of Amazon, just make sure that you double check the collar, because sometimes they have also sent out the wrong collar. Okay, so if you get the black edition, which is the curved one, there's like 5 different models. It's 1900S Black Edition, but they also have 1900S, 1900S Woodfield Edition or whatever. Like there's all these different models, and they're sending a different one that's not the Black Edition, but they're charging people the same price. And I go, no, that model is cheaper, you know?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I know. So, but yeah, I don't care where you get the collar from, but I just do care that you do get the correct collar that I recommend.
1900S black.
Yes, and Maria will send this information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Cool.
All right.